Hi friends! Today we're talking about weaning goat kids, different methods for weaning, timing to prevent unintentional breeding by butt kids, if you should wean wether and doe kids at all, and how to decide what weaning strategy will work best for your goat herd and management system. Let's get to it.
Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goat-Wise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock.
Hey friends! This is episode 80 of Get Goat-Wise, and we're only 20 episodes away from 100. I'd love to celebrate the 100th episode by hitting 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts. Some of you have already clicked on over and left a review, and if you're one of those folks, thank you. But if you haven't, and this podcast has encouraged you or helped you in your livestock raising goals, it would be a huge blessing to me if you could take 30 seconds to leave a review. Just search Get Goat-Wise on Apple Podcasts, scroll down to Ratings and Reviews, tap the purple words Write a Review, give me some stars, and tell me what you think. Your review helps more families discover the show, which means more people taking control of their food supply, and that's really what this is all about. Here's what's happening on the ranch this week. We had a very good rain early last week in the middle of the night, and it was heavy enough that water was running off, so it was good to see how some of the things we've been doing to slow down runoff and stop water erosion are working. So far, it's looking good. We got back from the chicken show, took a deep breath, and jumped right into the next thing. We've been in full-on prep mode for the Weston A. Price Foundation convention, non-stop cooking and testing samples to give out at our vendor booth. I'm excited to get there and meet great people and share what we have to offer. By the time this episode airs, we'll be home, and I can't wait to report on how that goes. I think the hardest part will be spending 3 days in the big city. I don't love that, but I'm sure it will be worth it. Since we've been so focused on conference prep, ranch work is stripped down to the basics: feeding, watering, and keeping track of the new ducks. So far, the dogs are leaving the ducks alone, and I hope it stays that way. The big project when we get back will be weaning the goat kids. So, what better time to talk about weaning? If you're new to livestock, weaning is when we separate the kids from the does so that the kids become independent from their moms for nutrition. Basically, they're no longer suckling the doe. One of the fun and sometimes frustrating things about goats is that there's not a lot of research or established common practices for goats like there are for cattle, sheep, or chickens. It's fun because I get to try different things until I figure out what works, and it's frustrating because sometimes I just want an answer. Just tell me how to do it right, and that's what I'll do. Weaning is one of those things. We draw a lot of our practices from our cattle experience, but this is one where you have to be a little more attentive and on schedule, or you could have some issues. First, let's talk about the butt kids. Male goats can be very fast maturing. Some breeds and types more than others, and this can be problematic when they start breeding the does, especially if you're trying to stay on a predictable kidding schedule. As a rule of thumb, if you're raising mini breeds like Nigerian dwarf or pygmy goats, the butt kids can successfully breed at 7 to 8 weeks old. Though that's still pretty early. 8 to 12 weeks is the typical range given for mini breeds. You'll want to wean and separate these little guys by 8 weeks old to keep them from breeding their moms. For full-size breeds, the earliest possible successful breeding age for bucks, according to the books, is 12 weeks, and the common range is 4 to 6 months old. Though I'd challenge this guideline if you've been selecting for productivity and maternal traits. We are finding out that the Spanish buck kids mature faster than the Boer buck kids, which means we are going to have to adjust our management system for that. When we weaned the buck kids, the average age was 12 weeks old, and many were capable of physically breeding, though I don't know if they could successfully settle a doe, and I hope they were not successful because that would mean winter kids for us, and that can be terrible here. So, what are your options for weaning? You could band buck kids before they're capable of breeding so you can leave them with the does longer. In episode 46, we talked about early and late banding, and I'll link that in the show notes. We did more banding at birth this year, and the results so far have been really good. I want to give banding at birth a few more years before I say, yeah, this is the way to go, but so far, so good. Banding at birth or banding before they are mature enough to breed is one option. That way, you don't have anything to worry about as far as unplanned breeding. Another option is to go ahead and wean the buck kids and leave the doe kids with their moms. When you do that, you need to treat them like mature bucks and make sure you have a space barrier and not just fence between the does and buck kids. This is one practice in cattle that can be problematic with goats. Fence line weaning when it comes to buck kids. Goats can breed through the fence. I laughed the first time someone told me that, and then I saw the attempts and realized that they really could get it done. So, don't fence line wean buck kids that may be mature enough to breed. I still think it's a long shot with buck kids, but if you want to be 100% sure, make sure there's a space barrier. I like to keep all our bucks far away from the does. I'd say our buck pens are 150 to 200 yards away from the doe pens. This also helps with behavioral issues. Even though the bucks are in rut right now, they're still pretty gentle because they can't smell does in heat. As it relates to weaning, you need to either band or wean buck kids by 8 weeks old for miniature breeds and 12 weeks for standard breeds. If you've been breeding for productivity and maternal traits and you want to be sure, I'd band or wean by 7 weeks for miniature breeds and 10 to 11 weeks for standard breeds. We are definitely moving our buck decision date earlier next year. Once the bucks are taken care of, either by weaning or banding, you have a lot of flexibility with the doe and wether kids. You can leave them on the does and let them self-wean. I know a lot of big goat producers do that, and I think in areas with a lot of space and adequate feed, it works just fine and may be less stressful on the does and the kids. In our management system, we don't do that for 2 main reasons. First, and probably most importantly, we don't want the doe kids exposed to breeding. And once we put the bucks in, everything in the pen is fair game. Second, in the winter, on the feed row, some of the more aggressive does will push the kids off feed. We want them to have abundant access to feed to grow through the winter, so separating them for feeding purposes makes the most sense for us. There are other benefits to weaning the kids. The does all dry up and put condition back on a similar timeline before breeding. When they self-wean, some will wean earlier than others, so they dry up and start gaining sooner, while others will continue to feed their kids into the winter months. That complicates winter feeding a bit, as the wider variation in body condition score is harder to evaluate and adjust feed to meet nutritional needs of all the does. For the kids, once we wean them, they get all the hay they want all winter long. That levels things up for twins versus singles. Over the winter, the twins will catch up and sometimes surpass the singles in performance, which makes selecting replacements much easier visually. We don't keep singles as replacements anyway, but it sure is tempting when they come in at weaning time comparatively huge and shiny from having all the milk and attention. But by the end of winter, the twins have made up a lot of ground, and their gain and feed efficiency is impressive. Finally, it simplifies breeding season as the doe kids are already separated and kept away from the bucks, and there isn't added stress on the does and their kids if we wait to separate them at breeding time. For our current management system, here's what works best. We band at birth any buck kids that don't make the cut to be a prospect buck. Then we band or wean buck kids by 12 weeks old, switching that to 10 weeks old next year. Wethers and doe kids stay with the does usually until the end of October, when everything is weaned at the same time. We will fence line wean this group of kids since there are no intact buck kids left in the group. I hope this episode helps you plan a weaning strategy that works for your management system and production plan. There are a lot of options when it comes to weaning, and the easiest way to know which is best for you is to pick one and try it. If it doesn't work out, try another way. And if you have any questions, email me, Millie, at drycreekpastures.com, or come on over to the free community and start a conversation. That's at getgoatwise.com/community. See you next week.
Hey there. Thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.